terribly forgettable. One, a heavily mustachioed hero of the Civil War who fought at Vicksburg, the other, the screenwriter of The Bells of St. Mary's, who also happens to have invented a device allowing naval vessels to lift mines harmlessly from the seabed. The town's website is where all this is so serendipitously revealed. It opens with a scratchy sound recording of an unidentified baritone reading a launchpad countdown. He follows this with the announcement of the liftoff in July 1969 of the Apollo 11 spacecraft, a ship that is destined, he says gravely, for the moon. And while his voice is intoning on what turns out to be an original NASA recording, an image of the moon swirls and grows steadily bigger on the screen until it's eventually replaced, with a booster's flourish, by an image of a bustling community and, in bold type, the name of the town, Wapakoneta. It's fitting that this small town should celebrate so eagerly the exploration of space. The worldwide excitement over the samples of lunar rock brought back to Earth is just one small indication of the value, in real scientific terms, of America's having sent a man up to get them. But there was an unanticipated and less obvious consequence of the expedition, the effect of which has been in many ways rather more enduring. For it appears now that one field of scientific discovery was changed forever by the journeyings of Neil Armstrong and all those others who have gone to the moon in the years since. This sea change has come about specifically in the science of geology, and it's a change that has its origins in a very simple fact. When Wapakoneta's first citizen was teetering gingerly about up there on the moon, he was able to do something that had never been done before, and that provided science with a profound, paradigm-shifting moment of unforgettable symbolism. He was able to stand on the lunar surface and look back at the Earth. To be sure, astronauts who had gone into orbit in the years beforehand were also able to see the totality of the planet, but there was something wholly remarkable in being able to stand upright on one world and gaze back at another more than 200,000 miles away. The great American biologist and philosopher Lewis Thomas wrote in 1974 of the symbolic importance of humankind having this new perspective. Viewed from the distance of the moon, he wrote, "The astonishing thing about the Earth catching the breath is that it is alive." The photographs show the dry, pounded surface of the moon in the foreground, dry as an old bone. Aloft, floating free beneath the moist, gleaming membrane of bright blue sky, is the rising Earth, the only exuberant thing in this part of the cosmos. If you could look long enough, you'd see the swirling of the great drifts of white cloud, covering and uncovering the half-hidden masses of land. If you'd been looking for a very long geologic time, you could have seen the continents themselves in motion, drifting apart on their crustal plates, held afloat by the fire beneath. It has the organized, self-contained look of a live creature, full of information, marvelously skilled in handling the sun. 5 years later, a British chemist and environmentalist named James Lovelock, thinking along much these same lines, used the moon view of the Earth to advance a long-considered idea that he called the Gaia hypothesis. The idea, which he christened with the ancient Greeks' name for the Earth goddess, Gaia, or Ge, and which has been rechristened as the even more plausible-sounding Gaia theory, now that his supporters believe so much of it has been proved, holds that the Earth in its totality is very much a living entity. It is alive, it is fragile, and everything that is in it preserves a complex balance with everything else in a state of mutually beneficial equilibrium. It so happens, to the dismay of many present-day scientific philosophers, that humankind's currently disharmonious behaviour is affecting this careful balance. There's a growing feeling that it must be changed radically and soon if life on Earth is to continue and to flourish. Now, this is not an environmental book by any means. It is more simply the story of one remarkable and tragic event that befell California a century ago, when a 300-mile-long swath of the Earth briefly shifted, wrecking the cities that lay atop it. But though it's not intended to be a Gaia book, it seems right to tell the story of the events that so ruined the city of San Francisco in 1906 within the context of the Gaia idea. There is, for a start, an interesting synchronicity at work. at the moment when Thomas and Lovelock were putting forward their ideas, in the late 1960s, at the same time as the beginning of space travel, and in part, of course, because of it, the geological sciences were also changing very profoundly, as we shall see. Neil Armstrong was able to gaze across the 250,000 miles that separate these two small planetary bodies and look directly towards that area of America from which he had come, at the hills and valleys of the self-same rocks where he had grown up, rocks that established geology and the fossil record tell us belonged to the Silurian age. And I've no doubt that it was in large measure because of this most extraordinary vision, extraordinary both for Neil Armstrong and in time for the rest of us too, that the birth was signalled of what is now coming to be regarded as an entirely new science. It was a science that was born and then helped to its feet quite simply by virtue of this new perspective that Neil Armstrong's view, even though it had long been anticipated by those who sent him and his colleagues into space, would shed on our planet. What he saw, and what we saw through his eyes, which we now perhaps take somewhat for granted, was a thing of incredible and fragile beauty. It was a floating, near-spherical body, tricked out in deep blue and pale green, with the white of polar ice and mountain summits, with great grey swirls and sheets of clouds and storms, and with the Terminator line that divides darkness and light seeming to sweep slowly across the planet's face as it turned into and out of the sun. It was a lovely aspect to contemplate, and it was a view that in time compelled humankind to take stock, to see ourselves as others see us, as Robert Burns had written. Here and now, all of a sudden, we realized that we could do just that. And with this unanticipated ability to do so, something about us suddenly changed, almost overnight, and essentially because of this new world view to which we had access. We discovered a whole raft of new reasons to ponder the oldest of age-old questions. Just where we stood in the celestial scheme of things, what the universe and its creation might mean, and how the very earth itself may have first come into being. And such ruminations led in short order to the makings of the scientific revolution, and most specifically to the geological revolution that is central to this story. A born-again science. Like alchemy and the medicine of the leech and the bleeding rod, the old geology is a science born long ago, most formally, I suspect, in the 18th century, one that, unlike so many of its sister sciences, chemistry, physics, medicine and astronomy, never truly left the era of its making. Since its beginnings, geology has been a field mired in some alluvial quagmire, defined by dusty cases of fossils, barely comprehensible diagrams of crystals, and the different kinds of breaks that were made in the Earth's surface, as well as by unlovely continental words like grub and gabbro and grey-wacky, and explained with cracked varnish wall roller charts showing how the world may have looked at the time of the Permian period. To me, it remains the most lyrical and romantic of the sciences, but in terms of glamour, and when compared with astrophysics or molecular biology, the old geology is somewhat wanting. The new geology is, on the other hand, a creature fashioned wholly from the science of the space age, from the attitude that was born when Neil Armstrong first looked back and gazed at the Earth. It is a science that now presents us with an entire canon of new ways in which we might look at this planet and at our stellar and solar neighbours. It seems to me quite fair and proper that the principles of this new science should underpin everything that follows. The terrifying and extraordinary event that enfolded the small but fast-growing Western American city of San Francisco one twilight California morning in the middle of April 1906. Many other scientific disciplines that are revolutionary and dauntingly modern, cosmology, genetic engineering, quantum mechanics, have been formed or founded in recent years and had no past to hold them back. But geology is different. It's a very old science indeed, and hugely proud of its origins. Portraits of the bearded ancients of its founding priesthood invariably hang in esteemed positions in departments from Anchorage to Adelaide. Its antiquity, however, has long been a problem for it, one that has tended to inhibit too many of its practitioners from escaping the glutinous hold of its earliest ideas. Students who remember measuring the umbos of brachiopods or trying to fathom the mysteries of recumbent folding can reach through centuries and join hands with students who were taught just the same things at the time of George IV.